Good afternoon. My name is Tara Meyer, and I'm presenting the work that Professors Smith and Falcon and I have done to update and revise the OER materials for HUSC 104, Developing Cultural Proficiency in a Diverse World. This course, formerly known as Diversity in the Workplace, is designed to increase students' awareness of their own and others' life experiences and the impact that those experiences have in interpersonal relations. This course is a general education course that fulfills both a social and behavior sciences and diversity requirement. It is taken by a wide range of students outside the Human Services Counseling major. It is also a required course for the P-TECH students and is currently under review for Global Studies designation. These are just some of the factors that led us to undertake the task of updating the OER materials, as well as several of the current assignments, to better reflect the current world and students taking the course outside of the Human Services Counseling program. Currently, the 14 modules in HUSC 104 are as follows: Basic Principles, Historical and Contemporary Models of Diversity, Cultural Competence and Resistance to Multiculturalism, Identity Development, Racial Identity Development, Sex and Gender Identity Development, Intersectionality, Social Justice and Ethics, Microaggressions, Systemic Inequalities, Best Practices in Equity, Culturally Responsive Service Delivery, Becoming an Activist, and Putting it all together. The current assignments include completing 14 course module readings, completing discussion board posts and responses to 2 peers and quizzes for each of the 14 modules. This is for the fully online sections only. Attending class sessions in the synchronous format in place of quizzes and discussion board postings. Papers for both synchronous and asynchronous sections include the GRATES assignment, which is currently a career paper, a cultural immersion project, a cultural autobiography, service learning, and an activism project. As all 3 of us have taught this course, we identified several areas that the current content could be enhanced and revised to consider current events and the diversity of our students. Within the 14 modules, we particularly wanted to look at the topics involving equity, racism, privilege, LGBTQ+, ableism, and ageism. We also wanted to include a section related to media, including digital footprints, ethics, and evaluating sources. We also updated links to articles and videos, as well as updated discussion boards, all while considering appropriate revisions to the assignments. One of the most exciting things to come out of this examination is due to the work of Professor Smith and the globalization of the course. The course will be under review in the upcoming semester, and we are very excited that HUSC 104 will meet the requirements for students interested in obtaining the Global Studies Certificate. To earn the global designation, the course will replace the current GRATES project, which was not applicable to many students, particularly the P-TECH students. This global project will encourage students to explore both course materials, such as TED Talks and CCBC library materials. It is our intention to engage the students to deepen their understanding of the OER materials available within the course. This project focuses on LGBTQ communities across the world. The project will ask students to write a 1,000-word essay contrasting how LGBTQ+ people are treated in other countries compared to the United States. It will specifically ask students to consider non-binary students in their research. This project will also help to move away from the LGBTQ+ students being the so-called class ambassadors for all things LGBTQ+, and it will increase the awareness not just domestically, but globally of the issues faced by LGBTQ+ community members. Another exciting part of HUSC 104 is the inclusion in the P-TECH program with Dundalk High. These are dual-enrolled students in the 10th and 11th grade who are working toward their AA degree in engineering while completing their high school requirements for graduation. I've taught this group of students for the last 3 semesters and quickly realized that there were essential modifications to be made to the course. One of the main problems I encountered was that due to the age and education level of the students, many did not have the prior knowledge we would expect of our adult learners. Because of this, some of the current OER materials were not as effective as they could be. Areas that students needed additional resources included understanding the civil rights movement, LGBTQ+, equity, systemic racism, and race in general. The students often commented that many of these topics aren't discussed in public high school. Other issues that arose within the P-TECH cohort included age-appropriate consideration of the materials. For example, most students could not identify what LGBTQ+ stands for. Also providing OER materials that would not be blocked by their BCPS-issued devices, which do not allow YouTube access. Getting students to do homework at home rather than in class, as is the norm in their high school classes, but not in college. And lastly, something all of us are dealing with, not being able to see our students. If they don't turn on their video, it is very hard to gauge their reactions and comfort with the sometimes sensitive topics covered in this course. This provided us with a great opportunity for OER revision that could benefit other students outside the P-TECH cohort. This included using tools such as Flipgrid and Kahoot to engage and check comprehension of the content, increased journaling assignments and other low-stakes writing, working with the technology they use every day, such as social media. An example of this is the creation of a social media activism project to replace the current one, which also reflected adapting to the current pandemic. In addition, I substituted the GRATES project, which was 100% career-focused and leaned heavily towards the Human Services Counseling program, which did not apply to these engineering students. I replaced that with a group project called the Presidential Press Briefing, which required students to work together as a group to research the racial wealth gap and present their proposed solutions to the president. We also felt that the OER materials should reflect the big issues of 2020, including Black Lives Matter and protests against police brutality, as well as the presidential election. Due to the very intense and at times divisive qualities of political and social events occurring throughout 2020, we need to make sure that we are addressing these issues in a format that calls everyone into the discussion. And then came the pandemic. OER materials can help students to stay connected to the course content. However, we needed to rethink some of the current assignments to adapt them to remote participation. The pandemic also brought several inequities to light, which also needed to be addressed. One way we did that was by including OER materials that looked at the pandemic and inequities and microaggressions through the lens of a global pandemic. Revising and refreshing the current OER materials would allow students and faculty to consider current events through the lens of diversity. Using OER materials will allow access to the most current versions of articles and videos. Links should be checked each semester for accuracy. OER materials are perfectly suited for a digital classroom and online learning. Using OERs can allow us to support students virtually. In addition, the library has many resources students can use, including a compilation of Black Lives Matter resources and LGBTQ+ resources, as well as other topics covered in this course. OER-based course materials enable us to address the diversity present within our classes, as well as providing our students with the most current information and best practices. We know that our students benefit from discussions with different ideas, and allowing all to hear the distinct voices within the class, we can select materials that elevate those whose voices have been historically marginalized, and we can tailor some of our materials to better reflect the demographics of the class. OER materials allow us to have the flexibility and the adaptability to reflect the overall goals of the course.